Figuring out which investments to pick as you're coming up to retiring and through retirement can be a little confusing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hey everyone, I'm Thiago with thefedcorner.com, where we're helping federal employees grow, manage, and protect their wealth. Today we're going to be talking about a question that we see quite often coming from viewers like yourself via email, and this is a really good one, so stick around. All right, so let's see. So this question came from a gentleman. It says, Thiago, I love the video. Look forward to the next one. The question is, what is the correct amount of time in years that I should move my TSP into safer funds before I retire? And this is a really important question that we get pretty often. And the answer is going to be a little bit different for each one of you. And the important things to consider as you're making this decision is what we're going to talk about here in a moment. Now, as a general rule, there are two major factors that you want to take into consideration when you're planning your retirement portfolio, really in any investment that you're going to put yourself in. The first one is your attitude towards taking risk. Some of you may be more conservative investors, others may be more aggressive, right? Just by nature, who we are as human beings. And the second factor is your aptitude towards taking risk. Now that's your ability to take risk. The first is attitude, your willingness. The second is attitude, your ability to take risk. Now, depending on how long you've been invested and how aggressively you've been invested throughout that period of time, you may have accumulated enough assets where now you've got a nice pile of money here that your primary job should be to maintain that so that you can continue withdrawing or start withdrawing from it in retirement, and also preserving that capital. You don't want that money to go away. You want to make sure that you don't run out of money before you run out of time. Now, I'd like for you to think of your money in terms of buckets. This is the easiest way to visualize this. And by that, I mean not just your TSP. So this includes all of your family's investable assets, which, any outside retirement accounts that your spouse might have if they're not a federal employee, or perhaps you've got other individual or joint accounts or trust assets. Anything that's not in the TSP should also be included in this. And these three buckets that I want you to think about are a short-term bucket, an intermediary bucket, and a long-term bucket. Now, short-term money is anywhere between 1 to 3 years. We're not going to count less than a year, okay? That is more immediate money and really shouldn't be invested too heavily in the market. So 1 to 3 years for a short-term bucket. And that money is for some upcoming plans. Maybe you've got some house repairs that you want to do, some renovations, or perhaps you're doing a down payment on a new home, or you've got some college expenses that you're going to pay off, educational expenses for your kids. There's a variety of things that could be coming up, which means that if left in cash, right, this is not an immediate thing. And so you start to feel the effects of inflation, which is what I like to call the silent portfolio killer, begin to erode the purchasing power of that money. But on the flip side, you don't want to be too aggressively invested because you may use that money within a year, and in the short term, markets are unpredictable, whereas the further along the timeline that we go, they become more predictable over time. So this money walks a really thin line of not embracing volatility, right? But also not being able to afford stagnation. Now, the next bucket is the intermediary bucket. And I like to put this somewhere between 3 years up to as much as 8 years. The recession in 2008 took somewhere between 3 to 3.5 years or so before it was made whole and had returned to its original value prior to the crash. So what this means is that if you have somewhere between 3 to 8 years before you need to take this money out of play, meaning now you need to use it, this money should generally be invested for growth. Now, the third bucket is the long-term bucket, and this is future money. So this is money that is always tasked with the objective of, number one, fighting inflation, number two, continuing to grow, and number three, maintaining your lifestyle throughout the future. 40 years ago, having roughly $300,000 spent to the equivalent of about $1 million today. And if that rate continues forward into the future, $1 million today really needs to be somewhere between $3 and $3.5 million 40 years into the future. Now, your investments right now in this long-term bucket need to be working as hard as they can be so that this task is not so daunting, so that you can continue having the same purchasing power that you have today in order to maintain your lifestyle 40 years, 30 years, 20 into the future. So what investments go inside which buckets? And there are myriad factors that impact the balance between the short, intermediate, and long-term buckets. Some of these are economic factors, so like the pandemic. The pandemic took the rug out from everyone's feet and people were left trying to figure out what's going on in the market. So there are other things going on in the markets, right? Some investments are cyclical, meaning that sometimes they do well, other times they don't, and they're replaced by a different sector in the market that is outperforming them. And so this balance between what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the markets, and then what's going on in your life, right? Your timeline, your needs, where are you living? What are you trying to accomplish? Those are the things that begin to determine and piece together how you need to be placing your investments inside those buckets. In the earlier years of your career, your portfolio's job is to basically grow so that it's seeing your future security, right? But at retirement, your portfolio's job completely changes, and it goes from being an accumulation vehicle to now being a decumulation vehicle as it begins to give you your retirement paychecks. But even when you retire and begin drawing from your portfolio, its job growing is not done yet, because many people will be retired for as long as they had their entire working career. And so it has to keep up with inflation, the silent portfolio killer, but it also has to continue to grow and maintain itself, because now you're drawing from it, which means you're depleting it, and inflation is continuing to rise the cost of living. And so you need to be able to support your lifestyle today 30, 40 years into the future. We don't know how long you're going to live. And again, the goal is to make sure that you don't run out of money before you run out of time. So back to the question, when do you need to start moving your investments into a safer fund? And the answer lies in working backwards towards solving for X. And so you need to start thinking about, what is your retirement going to look like? What other assets do you have to consider other than just your TSP? What does your lifestyle look like? There's a bunch of little factors and variables that you can start using to plug into that formula. The general rule is that you must have enough assets liquid that you can cover your immediate expenses or perhaps any emergency expenses that may come up unexpectedly, but also growing your portfolio where, if you have too much liquidity, now inflation is starting to hurt your purchasing power. And believe it or not, cash doesn't mean you're safe. You're still losing money. You're just losing purchasing power, not actual dollars. And the right blend between the three is only determined by looking at your overall financial picture, because just like a jigsaw, each little piece put together in the right way is what gives you the full picture. Your wants, needs, and desires, combined with economic variables and things changing in the market, those are the things that should be driving your investment decisions. And once you figure out what you want your retirement to look like, that's when we can work backwards in solving for X, which is determining how you should be invested in order to help get you there. And that's it, guys. Simple, but not easy. And so that's a reoccurring theme with everything we talk about. And so if you found value in this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, check us out, thefedcorner.com. You can send us an email or a message if you have questions that you want us to cover. We love doing these so we can help our community, because after all, it's not just your money, it's your future.